What would you do if a cop, filled with hatred, pointed a gun at you in public? No warning, no reason, just pure violence. Imagine the fear, the confusion, everything you thought you knew about safety, control, and justice suddenly being torn apart in a single moment. It's a heart-stopping situation, right? But here's the crazy part. This wasn't just a random act. This moment was part of something much bigger, something you never saw coming. And the best part? The person in danger wasn't just anyone. This was the FBI director's wife. Yes, you heard that right. A woman you would never expect to find in the middle of this kind of chaos. But she's about to be dragged into a life-changing, terrifying moment that no one could have predicted. Before we dive deeper, comment where you're watching from. We'd love to know. Sarah lived a quiet life. Most people didn't even know who she was, let alone that she was married to one of the most powerful men in the country, the FBI director. She liked it that way. She kept to herself, avoided attention, and just focused on the little things in life, like running errands or spending time with family. That day, Sarah had no idea her life was about to change in the most terrifying way possible. She wasn't looking for trouble, just another afternoon, just another trip to the store. But as she made her way across the parking lot, everything would suddenly shift. Then there was Officer David Turner. He wasn't just any cop. Known for his rough attitude and history of aggressive behavior, Turner saw himself as someone who deserved respect, whether he earned it or not. His bias and anger had been simmering for a while, and today he was about to cross a line he never could have imagined. He thought his position gave him power over anyone and everyone, but he had no idea who he was about to face. Their paths were about to collide in the worst possible way, and nothing would ever be the same again. Sarah couldn't understand why this was happening. One minute, she was walking to her car, just another regular day in the parking lot. The next, she was faced with a cop who was furious at her for reasons she couldn't fathom. Officer Turner's voice was sharp and accusing, his words laced with anger. Sarah felt her heart race, confusion and fear filling her as she tried to figure out what she had done wrong. But the truth was, she hadn't done anything wrong. Turner wasn't even looking for a reason. He was just angry, and she happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. As Turner's shouting continued, the bystanders around them shifted uneasily. Some seemed too scared to even look, while others quietly tried to record what was happening. Sarah felt exposed, trapped in this strange, terrifying situation. She had always known that being married to the FBI director came with its own pressures, but she never imagined it would lead to something like this. It wasn't just a bad encounter, it was an escalating danger, one that felt completely out of her control. Then everything seemed to slow down. She saw Turner's hand reach for his gun. It was a small movement, but it sent a jolt of panic through her body. The people around her seemed to hold their breath as Turner's anger bubbled over, now more than just verbal. The fear in Sarah's chest grew heavier. She could feel the gun being aimed in her direction, even though she wasn't sure if he had fully pulled it yet. She couldn't think straight, couldn't move, couldn't even believe what was happening. There was no escape. If she ran, he could shoot. If she tried to talk, he might take it as a threat. The air around her felt thick, like everything was standing still. The only sound she could hear was her own heartbeat, loud and fast. The worst part? She was entirely on her own. No one was stepping forward. No one was trying to help. And she realized with a sinking feeling that no one would. In that moment, the world seemed to fall silent. Her mind raced, trying to figure out what to do, what to say to defuse the situation, but nothing came to her. She could see Turner's face, twisted in anger, his hand still hovering over the weapon. This wasn't just an angry confrontation anymore. This was a dangerous, life-threatening moment. Then, just as the tension reached its peak, a voice cut through the silence. It wasn't just any voice. Sarah's heart skipped a beat as she recognized the familiar tone. Her husband, the FBI director, had arrived. He was here. But even with his presence, the situation hadn't changed. Turner wasn't backing down. His focus remained solely on Sarah, and his eyes were still full of rage. The director stepped forward, trying to reason with Turner, but it seemed like his words were falling on deaf ears. Turner's grip on the gun tightened, his stance growing more aggressive. He wasn't listening. The crowd around them was still frozen in place, each person unsure of what to do. Sarah could see their fear, mirrored in her own. This wasn't just a personal moment anymore. It was a public spectacle. The pressure was building, and Sarah could feel it in every part of her. Her body screamed for her to do something, anything. But what? What could she do to stop this madness? The director stood firm, his calm voice cutting through the chaos. But even he knew this wasn't something that could be talked away easily. Turner was dangerous, and he wasn't just going to let go of this rage because someone told him to. Sarah's stomach twisted. If Turner didn't listen to the director, if he didn't drop the gun, then what? Everything around her felt like it was happening in slow motion. Turner was now entirely focused on the director, his anger bubbling over into something even more dangerous. The director's voice was firm, commanding, but Turner was losing it. Sarah could feel the weight of the situation settling in. The longer this dragged on, the more likely someone would get hurt. But she couldn't even tell if it was her life on the line anymore. With each passing second, it was clear. This wasn't just about her. Turner's actions were bigger than any personal confrontation. They were about power, about control, and the cost of letting rage rule over reason. The air felt charged as the confrontation finally erupted. The crowd that had gathered in the parking lot was in complete chaos. Some people were whispering in disbelief, others too afraid to even look. All eyes were on Sarah and Officer Turner, and the tension in the air was suffocating. Sarah stood there, her heart pounding, but she didn't back down. She wasn't sure what was about to happen, but one thing was clear. This was a moment she would never forget. Turner's gaze was intense, like a coiled snake ready to strike. His anger was evident, but there was something else, too. Fear. He was scared, and it made him even more dangerous. Sarah could feel the weight of the moment. Every second felt like an eternity, and she knew that one wrong move could send everything spiraling out of control. She had no idea how to defuse this situation, but her instincts told her she had to stand her ground, even if her body was screaming at her to run. Then, as if on cue, the FBI director appeared. His presence cut through the chaos like a knife, through butter. Calm but determined, he wasn't just another person in the crowd. He was the one who could bring order to this madness. His authority filled the air, and Sarah felt a small sense of relief wash over her. But even with the director there, things weren't any easier. Turner wasn't backing down. The director spoke with a quiet power, his voice unwavering as he demanded Turner drop the gun. Every word carried weight, every syllable demanding Turner's obedience. The air seemed to thicken with the tension between them. It wasn't just a standoff now, it was a battle of wills. On one side, you had the director, the symbol of law and order, and on the other, Turner, a man consumed by anger, fear, and pride. Both were locked in a struggle for control, but only one of them had the power to end it all. Turner's hand tightened around the gun. His knuckles went white, and for a split second, Sarah thought he might pull the trigger. His anger wasn't just a reaction. It was something deeper. It was the fear of losing everything. His career, his life. He knew that this could be the end of his journey as a cop. Everything he had built was hanging by a thread, and he was willing to fight to keep it all from slipping away. The gun in his hand was the only thing that seemed to give him control, but even that wasn't enough to make him feel safe. The director wasn't backing down either. He stepped closer to Turner, his movements measured, precise. He knew that. Turner was at a breaking point. Every step he took, every word he said was meant to break Turner's resolve. But would it be enough to stop him? The power struggle between the two men felt almost tangible, like a physical force pressing down on everyone around them. And then there was silence. A heavy, oppressive silence. The director was now just a few feet away from Turner, their eyes locked. It was the kind of stare that said everything without a single word being spoken. The weight of the moment was unbearable. This was it. The tipping point. One move, one word, could change everything. The tension was so thick that Sarah could almost taste it. For a second, no one moved. The crowd, once in chaos, had become a sea of stillness, watching and waiting for the next step. Sarah's heart was in her throat. She could feel the power in the air. But what would it take to end this? Would Turner finally drop the gun? Or would everything spiral into disaster? This wasn't just about Sarah anymore. It was about two men locked in a deadly game, and the outcome was uncertain. The standoff was now at its peak. The balance between life and death hung in the air, and Sarah was caught in the middle of it all. But who would win? The man driven by fear and rage, or the one who had the authority to end it? The silence seemed to stretch on forever, and Sarah realized just how much was on the line. The stakes had never been higher. Just when everything seemed like it was about to settle, the twist hit like a thunderclap. Sarah wasn't just some innocent bystander caught up in this chaos. No, she had a role in all of this from the very beginning. Everything that had happened, from the confrontation with Turner to the escalating tension, was part of a much bigger plan. Sarah wasn't just the FBI director's wife, she was an undercover investigator. All along, she had been working in secret to bring Turner down. The entire encounter wasn't some random act of violence. It was a carefully planned trap, designed to expose everything Turner had been hiding. The gun, the threat, the escalating situation. It was all part of the strategy to make Turner reveal his true nature. As Sarah stood there, waiting for Turner's reaction, she saw the shock register on his face. It was like a switch flipped in his mind. He was realizing it all now. Every move he had made, every threat, every moment of rage, it was all leading up to this. The very woman he had targeted, the one he had treated with so much hostility, was the one who had been pulling the strings the entire time. Turner's face went pale. The color drained from him, and for the first time in this entire standoff, he looked vulnerable. His eyes darted around as if searching for a way out. But there was no escape now. The weight of his actions hit him like a ton of bricks. It was never just about a random attack. It was about exposing the deep corruption that had taken root in his soul. The truth was, he had been living a lie, believing he was untouchable, that his badge protected him from the consequences of his actions. Now, everything was crashing down. His career was over. The moment he raised his gun at Sarah, everything changed. The investigation had been building up to this very moment, and now Turner's entire life was unraveling. He couldn't outrun what he had done. He couldn't escape the truth that had been laid bare. The consequences of his actions were just beginning, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. The silence that followed was suffocating. Sarah's heart was racing, her mind spinning with everything that had just happened. She had known this moment would come, but even now she couldn't fully grasp the gravity of it. Turner's life, his career, everything he had worked for, it was all gone in an instant. But for Sarah, this was just the beginning. She had played her part, she had done what was necessary, but there was still more to be done. Turner's downfall was just the first piece of the puzzle. But then, just as the tension seemed unbearable, Turner made his move. The realization of his fate was too much for him to bear, and he took a desperate step. He didn't accept what was happening to him. He fought back, as if he could somehow change the outcome, as if he could escape the consequences of his own actions. The pressure was mounting, and with every passing second, the situation became more volatile. Would Turner finally accept his fate, or would he try to flee from it? The stakes had never been higher. His entire future was hanging by a thread, and with one final, reckless decision, he could change everything. But what would that decision be? Sarah stood there, watching, knowing that whatever happened next would shape not only Turner's future, but her own as well. She had come this far, but the final outcome was still uncertain. Would Turner face the consequences of his actions, or would he make one final, desperate attempt to escape? The pressure was unbearable. The next few moments would determine everything. The fallout from the incident came quickly. Officer Turner was fired immediately, his badge removed, and his career destroyed. The news hit fast. His downfall, a result of his own actions. Across the country, people reacted with a mix of shock and relief. The weight of his actions was finally recognized, and justice seemed to be served. But for Sarah, the story was far from over. Sarah never sought attention, yet here she was, the face of justice in a situation that was never meant to be hers. She didn't ask for this spotlight. She didn't want to be a symbol. But in confronting Turner, she had become one. The truth she had fought so hard to uncover had finally come to light, but it wasn't just about Turner's actions. It was about everything he represented. The system that allowed men like him to operate without fear of consequences was what truly needed to be changed. And Sarah, despite everything she had been through, knew that this was just the first step. The community's response was varied. Some cheered her bravery, praising her for taking a stand when most would have backed down. Others, however, couldn't ignore the deeper problem. Yes, Turner was gone, but how many others like him were still in positions of power, hiding behind badges and authority? The real question wasn't whether Sarah had done the right thing. She had. It was what came next. For Sarah, it wasn't enough to expose one man. The corruption that had allowed him to rise had to be uprooted from the foundation. That kind of change wouldn't come overnight. For the FBI director, the situation was bittersweet. While he was proud of Sarah's courage, he also knew the victory was hollow. Exposing one person's actions didn't change the system that allowed it. Turner was a symptom of a much larger problem. And now that he was out of the picture, the real work could begin. The director understood that this was just one battle in a much longer war. The road to true justice would be long and challenging, and it wouldn't be solved with a single victory. As Sarah reflected on everything, the weight of it all sank in. This wasn't just about a moment of triumph or personal safety. It was about standing up for something much bigger than herself. When she first found herself in this situation, she never imagined it would go this far. But now that it had, she understood why she had to keep going. This fight was never about protecting herself or her family. It was about fighting against a broken system. She realized that the moment you allow injustice to continue, no matter how small, you become complicit. And she wasn't willing to live that way. The lesson Sarah learned was powerful. Even in the face of overwhelming fear, doing the right thing was the only choice that mattered. It wasn't easy. Standing up to hate and corruption never is. But it was the only way forward. Because without action, without people willing to speak the truth, nothing would change. For Sarah, this was the beginning of a lifelong fight. It wasn't over just because Turner had been exposed. The truth was, her actions were only the start of a much larger movement. As the dust settled, Sarah knew she had made a difference. She had taken a stand when others would have backed down, and in doing so, she had exposed a broken system that needed to be fixed. But the road to real justice wouldn't be easy. It would take more than one woman's bravery to change the world. It would take every single person who was willing to challenge the darkness. Sarah had taken the first step, and though it was just the beginning, she was ready to keep fighting. This story reminds us all of a simple truth. Justice isn't always easy. Sometimes it comes at a personal cost. But standing up against hate, especially in the darkest moments, has the power to change everything. It's not always about winning in the traditional sense. It's about choosing to do what's right, even when it's tough. Would you have had the courage to confront such a dangerous situation? to put everything on the line for the truth? What does justice really mean to you? It's something we all have our own ideas about. For some, it's about fairness. For others, it's about standing up for the voiceless. But no matter what justice looks like, it's clear that we all play a part in it. Whether we choose to speak up or stay silent, our actions ripple out and shape the world around us. Comment below with your thoughts. Have you ever faced a moment where standing up for what's right changed the course of your life? We want to hear your stories. Share with us how you found the courage to fight for justice. If you found this story powerful, make sure to like, share, and subscribe for more unforgettable tales of courage, truth, and justice. There's so much more coming your way, and you won't want to miss it. Stay tuned for the next chapter of real-life stories that challenge everything we know about justice.